We are turning our attention today to a subject that is, I think, frequently misunderstood.
Mhm.
In the popular imagination, it's often reduced to a simple wellness trend, a feature on a digital app, or maybe just a quick fix for the anxieties of modern life. We're talking about meditation.
Hmm.
However, our objective here is not to view it through that lens, the lens of relaxation or lifestyle improvement. We're going to be examining it as a complex historical and physiological practice, one with a biography that spans thousands of
It's a
years.
very long biography.
It is. We have a substantial collection of material to work from here. Historical texts, scholarly reports, a number of medical reviews. So our mission is to trace the lineage of this practice, from its earliest recorded origins in, say, the Upanishads, all the way to its modern applications in clinical and even corporate settings.
And it's a massive subject. I mean, when you actually start looking at the data and the history, you realize pretty quickly that what we colloquially call meditation, it's not a single entity.
Not at
It's
all.
a family of practices. It's a vast family of practices. We're dealing with sources that range from ancient Sanskrit texts all the way to, modern neuroimaging studies from major medical institutions. So my role here is really to synthesize these very diverse data points, the religious and the scientific. We need to find the fundamental why behind the practice.
To understand the evolution of it.
Exactly. We're trying to understand how a technique that was originally designed for spiritual liberation, I mean, literally escaping the human condition, how that evolved into a tool for lowering your blood pressure or managing corporate stress.
We should probably begin with the definition. It seems that just defining meditation is a significant hurdle for scholars. There's an immediate divergence in the etymology depending on whether you're looking at the Western or the Eastern roots of the word.
It's absolutely correct. The difficulty starts with language itself. The English term meditation. It's derived from the Latin meditatio and the verb meditare.
And in Latin, what did that mean?
In its original context, that word meant to think, to contemplate, to devise, or to ponder. It implies a very active cognitive process. So if you were engaged in meditatio, you were thinking about something. You were turning a subject over in your mind, analyzing it, maybe even planning.
That seems to be in direct contradiction to the popular understanding of meditation today, which is so often described as emptying the mind or, stopping the thought process.
Precisely. And that's because the English word was adopted to translate Eastern concepts that mean something fundamentally different. In the traditions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, the key term is dhyana. It comes from the Sanskrit root dhy.
Die.
Yes. And while translators often use contemplation for this, the practice of dhyana specifically targets the cessation of what's called discursive thinking.
Discursive thinking. That's the reflexive, logical, internal monologue that just runs constantly, the narrator in your head.
That's the one. The voice that categorizes and judges and plans. The Latin meditatio encourages using that voice to analyze a subject. The Sanskrit dhyana encourages detaching from it, or in some cases, shutting it down entirely. So you see, right from the very start, we have this linguistic collision.
And that's why a single definition is so elusive.
It is. Because of this, scholars have struggled to find one universally accepted definition. There is this constant tension between the technique, what you physically do with your brain and your body, and the tradition, so the belief system and the goals that surround it.
To manage this complexity, researchers have developed classification systems. They categorize these practices based on what the brain is actually doing. We have a breakdown of 3 main types.
Yes, these are the standard typologies used in modern research. The first is focused attention, or you'll sometimes hear it called concentrative meditation. This is likely what most people envision when they hear the word.
So focusing on one thing.
Exactly. You focus your attention on a specific object. Now, that object could be the sensation of the breath coming in and out. It could be a mantra you repeat. It could be a visual image, or even a concept like loving kindness. The instruction is simple, but, it's very difficult to keep the attention on the object,
And when the mind wanders.
which it will. The instruction is simply to catch it, notice that it has wandered, and then gently bring it back to the object of focus.
It's essentially a repetitive exercise for the attention span then, like a workout for focus.
That's a perfect analogy. You're training the muscle of focus. The second type is open monitoring, which is often associated with the term mindfulness.
Okay, so how does that differ from focused attention?
Instead of narrowing the beam of attention down to a single point, you widen it. You engage in a non-reactive monitoring of all mental events. You just observe thoughts, feelings, sounds, physical sensations, whatever arises in your awareness.
And you don't latch on to any one of them.
You don't. And crucially, you don't get involved in the story that they're telling. You simply act as the witness. You watch them rise and fall without judgment.
There's also a third category mentioned in the materials, described by Jonathan Shear: automatic self-transcending.
Yes, this is a more nuanced category. Shear argues that certain techniques, like transcendental meditation or TM, they function differently than the first two. They're designed not to hold focus effortfully, nor to monitor broadly, but to allow the mind to automatically, to transcend its own activity.
What does that mean in practice?
The theory is that the practice itself, once it's initiated, it causes the mental activity to just disappear or settle down into silence. And it does this without the practitioner having to try to make it happen. It's meant to be an effortless process.
Across all these different definitions and types, there's a recurring criterion that's mentioned in the literature. It's called logic relaxation.
Logic relaxation is a critical concept. It was identified by expert panels as a way to distinguish meditation from other forms of thought. It essentially means not judging the process while it's happening.
So you suspend the analysis.
You have to. It's the intention not to analyze the effects during the practice. You're not sitting there thinking, is my blood pressure lower yet? Or am I feeling more relaxed now? Or, am I enlightened yet?
Because if you're doing that, you're not meditating.
You're no longer meditating. You are back to thinking. You're analyzing. You have to suspend that logical analyzing faculty to allow the practice to unfold.
All right, so let's move into the biography of the practice itself. We've established the definitional challenges. Now we should look at the history. The records we have indicate that this biography really begins in the ancient East.
That's right. The earliest clear records we have come from the Hindu tradition, specifically from the text known as the Upanishads. We see the concept of dhyana appearing there, but the practice becomes very, very systematic with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
And when do those date to?
They're dated to roughly 400 CE. Patanjali outlines what he calls the 8 limbs of yoga. This is a comprehensive framework for spiritual development.
And in this context, meditation isn't the whole practice. It's just one step on a ladder, so to speak.
Exactly. It's a progression. It's not something you just jump into. You can't just sit down and expect to reach these higher states without doing the groundwork first. You start with the yamas, which are ethics or moral restraints, things like nonviolence, truthfulness.
So a moral foundation.
A moral and ethical foundation, yes. Then you move to things like pratyahara, which is the withdrawal of the senses, literally pulling your attention away from the external world and turning it inward. Eventually, after several other steps, you reach dhyana, meditation, and then the final limb, samadhi, absorption or union.
It's also important to note the philosophical split here. It wasn't one single goal.
Not at all. You have, for example, Advaita Vedanta, which is a non-dualistic philosophy. The goal there is identifying the individual self, the Atman, with the omnipresent ultimate reality, or Brahman.
The drop merging with the ocean.
The classic metaphor, yes. But then you have dualistic yoga, which aims to do the opposite. It seeks to separate pure consciousness, Purusha, from nature, or Prakriti. So one seeks union, the other seeks separation and liberation through that separation.
And alongside Hinduism, we have the Jainist tradition developing. Their approach appears to be significantly more rigorous, especially regarding the concept of karma.
Jainism is often overlooked in general discussions of meditation, but its contribution is fascinating and very distinct. The goal in Jainism is to reach a pure state of the soul. They use the term gadadrashta,
Which means?
knower-seer. The meditator strives to become a pure observer, completely beyond attachment or aversion. But their view of karma is unique. It's not just an abstract principle of cause and effect. They view karma almost as a physical substance, like a fine dust or matter that adheres to the soul.
A physical substance. So the purpose of meditation in Jainism is to literally remove this substance.
Yes, that's the core idea. They believe that passions, anger, greed, ego, these things attract this karmic dust, which then weighs down the soul and keeps it bound to the cycle of rebirth. So meditation is a method, a technology to stop that accumulation, to stop the inflow, and also to burn off what's already there.
Are there specific techniques for this?
There are. The sources point to techniques like Dharma Dhyana, which involves discriminating knowledge or analyzing the nature of reality. And then there's a Shukala Dhyana, which is considered a pure, stainless meditation that leads to final liberation. It's a profound process of, as you said, cleaning the soul.
Moving from there to Buddhism, which is perhaps the most well-known vehicle for meditation in the modern world.
Yes, Buddhism really put meditation at the very center of its practice. The focus shifted heavily toward the goals of awakening and nirvana. And within Buddhism, we see that clear distinction we mentioned earlier between samatha and vipassana.
Calm and insight.
Calm abiding, samatha, and insight, vipassana. Samatha settles the mind. It creates the stability and concentration needed. It's like sharpening the knife. Vipassana is then using that sharp, settled mind to investigate the nature of reality, specifically to deconstruct the conventional notion of the self.
And this practice evolved as it moved geographically, didn't it?
Drastically. When Buddhism traveled from India to China, it interacted with Taoism, and the result was Chan Buddhism. This eventually made its way to Japan, where it became known as Zen.
And Zen has its own distinct flavor of meditation.
Very much so. In the Zen tradition, particularly in the Soto school, you have Zazen, which just means sitting meditation. The practice itself evolved into concepts like Wunyan, which means no thought, and Hishiri, which is translated as non-thinking.
Non-thinking. What does that mean? It sounds like an impossible instruction.
It's subtle. The instruction isn't to violently stop thoughts, but to turn the attention away from the objects of thought and back toward the perceiving subject itself. It's less about achieving a state of bliss or calm, and more about a rigorous, direct confrontation with the fundamental nature of the mind.
That transition to China brings us neatly to the parallel evolutions. While these complex systems were developing in India, other cultures were developing their own contemplative technologies. Taoism, for instance.
Yes, Taoism offers a very somatic or body-oriented approach. We have texts like the Guanzi essay, which dates all the way back to the 4th century BCE, discussing qi cultivation and breath control. So the focus on the body and its energies is very ancient.
But there was a mental component as well.
Absolutely. There's a famous concept called zhuang. It's translated as sitting forgetting.
Sitting forgetting. The material we have quotes the Zhuangzi regarding sloughing off limbs. It's a very vivid description.
It is. The Zhuangzi text describes it this way. I slew off my limbs and trunk, dim my intelligence, depart from my form, leave knowledge behind, and become identical with the transformational thoroughfare. It's a profound description of losing the sense of a separate self to merge with the Tao, the underlying principle of the universe.
This also developed into moving forms of meditation.
Yes, which is a key contribution of Taoism, practices like Tai Chi and Qigong. The idea here is movement in stillness and stillness in movement. It's about maintaining that internal meditative state of awareness and flow while the body is in constant gentle motion.
We also see parallel developments in the Abrahamic faiths. Now, these are often categorized strictly as prayer, but the historical records show clear meditative practices.
There's a very strong, though sometimes hidden, meditative current in the Abrahamic traditions. In Judaism, for instance, the notes point to the biblical story of Isaac going out to the field. The Hebrew term used there is laswoch, which is often interpreted by scholars as a meditative practice.
And there are specific Hebrew words for this kind of activity.
Yes, you have terms like haga, which can mean to murmur or to meditate, and siya, which means to muse or converse with oneself. The repetition of scripture or divine names, sometimes in a low murmur, was a way to enter a deep contemplative state.
And the Kabbalistic traditions took this much further.
Much further. Kabbalah involves very complex visualizations of supernal realms of the divine structure of reality. And then you have a practice like Hitbodut, which was popularized by Rebbe Nachman of Breslov.
What does that entail?
It means self-seclusion. Literally taking oneself out into nature, to a field or forest, to be alone with the divine. And there you speak spontaneously, pouring out your heart. It's a practice of stripping away all the social masks to stand authentically before God.
In Christianity, the distinction from the Eastern forms seems to be about the content of the mind. Is that fair to say?
Generally, yes. Traditional Christian meditation is not about creating a void or emptying the mind. It's about filling the mind with reflection on God, on the life of Christ, or on Scripture. The prime example of this is Lectio Divina, or divine reading.
And that's a structured process.
A very structured one. It's often described as a ladder with 4 rungs. You start with reading, lectio. Then you move to pondering, meditatio. There's that Latin word again. From there to prayer, oratio, and finally to contemplation, contemplatio, which is a kind of silent, restful state in the presence of God.
However, the notes do mention hesychasm, which seems much closer to the Eastern method of repetition.
It does. Hesychasm is the tradition particularly associated with the Eastern Orthodox Church, specifically the monks of Mount Athos. The core of their practice is the ceaseless repetition of the Jesus prayer.
And this repetition functions like a mantra.
It functions very similarly to a mantra. By repeating the phrase, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, continuously, the practitioner centers the mind and quiets other thoughts. The goal is to achieve an experiential knowledge of God, what they call the vision of the uncreated light. It uses the physiology of repetition to achieve a profound spiritual state.
And finally, within the Abrahamic family, Islam, specifically the Sufi tradition.
Sufism has incredibly rich meditative practices. You have dhikr, which is the remembrance of God. This often involves the rhythmic repetition of the 99 names of God. There's muraqabah, which is a kind of high-intensity introspection, watching over one's own heart.
And a more intellectual form as well.
Yes, tafakkar. This is deep reflection upon the universe, upon creation, as a way to access divine inspiration and understand the greatness of the Creator. And of course, we can't forget the physical aspect, the whirling dervishes of the Mevlevi order.
A very dynamic form of meditation.
Arguably one of the most dynamic in existence. That spinning is a physically active meditation designed to induce a state of spiritual ecstasy and focus, abandoning the ego to unite with the divine.
So we have these traditions developing across the globe, often in parallel. Let's talk about the mechanics, the tools of the trade. Regardless of the philosophy, the human body is the common denominator here.
Correct. And the body must be positioned in a way that can sustain these states of mind. The most iconic postures are, of course, the lotus and half-lotus positions, or the Japanese kneeling posture, seisa. But there's actual science behind the equipment used. We have a study here regarding the zafu cushion.
This is the round, firm cushion often used in Zen meditation.
It is. A 2018 pilot study looked at different seating options. It found that the zafu provided the most stability against side-to-side body sway when compared to meditation benches or simply sitting in a chair.
And why is that stability so important?
It's crucial because physical stillness supports mental stillness. If the body is constantly fighting gravity or making small adjustments to keep its balance, the mind is alerted. It's a low-level distraction. A stable posture allows the nervous system to settle. Of course, there are alternatives like walking meditation, Kinhin in Zen, or lying down, Shavasana in yoga, but the seated, upright posture remains the gold standard for combining relaxation with alertness.
Speaking of tools, prayer beads seem to be a near-universal phenomenon.
It's a striking cross-cultural convergence, isn't it? In Hinduism and Buddhism, you have the mala, which traditionally has 108 beads.
Why 108?
In Buddhism, it's said to represent the 108 human passions or defilements that must be overcome. In Hinduism, the number 108 has all sorts of spiritual and astronomical significance.
And we see similar tools in the West.
We do. In Islam, the misbah or tasbih typically has 99 beads, which correspond to the 99 names of God. The Catholic rosary usually has 5 sets of 10 beads for reciting prayers. In all these cases, the tactile sensation of counting the beads allows the mind to focus on the repetition while also occupying the hands. It engages the sense of touch to anchor the attention.
It prevents the mind from drifting.
It helps, yes. It's a physical anchor for a mental process.
There is one tool mentioned in the Zen section that, well, it stands out. The encouragement stick.
The kaisaku, or kisaku, yes, it often surprises people. In some Zen traditions, a senior monk, a monitor, patrols the meditation hall with a flat wooden stick.
And they strike meditators with it?
They do. If a meditator is becoming drowsy, or if their mind is particularly agitated and wandering, they can signal the monitor. The monitor then comes over and strikes them firmly on the shoulders with the stick.
To the modern ear, that sounds punitive, like a punishment.
And that's the common misconception. It's not intended as a punishment at all. It's strictly for invigorating the practitioner. The etiquette surrounding it is vital. The monk sitting must usually request it, or at least consent to it, and they bow to each other before and after. It's seen as an act of compassion, of supporting the meditator's effort to stay awake and focused. It uses a sudden, sharp physical sensation to snap the mind back to the present moment.
The notes also briefly mention a more chemical tool, psychedelics.
Yes, there is emerging, and in some cases re-emerging, research in this area. Some studies are suggesting that substances like psilocybin and DMT may enhance meditative training or lead to profound insightfulness.
A controversial area.
A very controversial area. But the historical overlap between altered states of consciousness induced by certain substances and those induced by disciplined practice is now being explored scientifically. The central question is whether the chemical induction leads to the same place, the same lasting benefits, as the long, disciplined practice. That's still very much an open question.
This brings us to the major pivot in our biography of meditation, the secular shift. How did these ancient religious practices become something a modern doctor might prescribe?
We can trace the transmission to the West, to a few key moments. I think a major milestone was the 1893 World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. This was the first major exposure many Westerners had to authentic Asian teachers, like Swami Vivekananda. It introduced the philosophy to an intellectual audience.
And then there was a much larger wave in the mid-20th century.
Yes, the 1960s and 70s. You had the counterculture movement, which was actively looking for alternatives to Western materialism. This, combined with political shifts in Asia that sent many teachers and refugees to the West, created a huge surge in interest. But the real pivot, the thing that allowed it to go mainstream, was the decoupling of the technique from the belief system.
The birth of secular meditation.
That's it. It was stripped of its cosmology of rebirth, karma, deities, and complex philosophy, and it was presented simply as a mental training technique, a tool for the mind.
And the medical validation followed not long after.
Herbert Benson's work in the 1970s was seminal. He was a cardiologist at Harvard. He studied practitioners of transcendental meditation and coined the term the relaxation response.
He demystified it.
He demystified the process entirely. He showed that you didn't need to be a monk, you didn't need to adopt any beliefs to get tangible physiological benefits. He documented lowered heart rate, lower blood pressure, reduced stress hormones. He proved it was a physiological mechanism, not just a spiritual one.
There is a statistic in our materials regarding oxygen consumption that is quite remarkable.
It's one of the most striking physiological findings, I think. During meditation, oxygen consumption can drop by 10 to 20%, and this happens within the first 3 minutes of practice.
How does that compare to sleep?
Well, that's what makes it so striking. During a full night's sleep, oxygen consumption drops only about 8%, and that takes hours to occur. This indicates that meditation induces a state of deep rest that is physiologically distinct from, and in some ways deeper than, sleep.
And the brain waves reflect this unique state.
They do. We see a slowing of brainwave activity. From the faster beta waves, which are associated with active thought, and alpha waves, which are associated with a relaxed state, down to much slower delta and theta waves,
Which are usually seen in sleep.
They're states usually associated with deep, dreamless sleep. Yet, the meditator remains alert and conscious. It's this unique combination of deep physiological rest and mental alertness that seems to be the physiological signature of many meditative states. It helps explain why even a short session can feel incredibly restorative.
In terms of specific medical applications, pain management is mentioned as a particularly strong area.
The evidence for pain reduction is considered moderate to strong. It seems to work by changing the person's relationship to the pain. The raw sensation might still be there, but the emotional suffering, the story, the resistance attached to it is significantly reduced.
But it's not a cure-all.
We must be objective here, yes. The evidence for other popular claims, like significant weight loss or as a primary cure for insomnia, is much weaker or mixed. So it's a powerful tool, but not a panacea.
Despite the mixed evidence on some fronts, its modern application is now incredibly widespread.
It has been thoroughly institutionalized. You have corporate wellness programs like Google's Search Inside Yourself and programs at companies like General Mills. They're using it to improve focus and emotional intelligence in their employees.
And in some more surprising places as well.
Absolutely. The military uses it for mental clarity and stress control in high-pressure combat situations. Schools are using practices like transcendental meditation and have seen moderate positive effects on student well-being and social competence. It has truly become a tool for optimization in almost every field of modern life.
However, our analysis would be incomplete and frankly irresponsible if we ignored the warnings in the source material. We need to look at what's sometimes called the shadow side of the practice.
This is a crucial point. There's a pervasive modern myth that meditation is universally harmless, that it's just sitting quietly, so what could possibly go wrong? But if a practice is powerful enough to change your brain structure and drop your metabolism by 20%, it is absolutely powerful enough to have adverse effects.
And the traditional sources have always known this. They contain warnings.
They do. The traditions have always been aware of the potential dangers. In Zen, for example, there's the concept of makyu.
Maki.
It refers to hallucinations or perceptual distortions that can arise during deep meditation. Visions, sounds, strange bodily sensations. These are not seen as signs of progress. They're considered barriers, tricks of the mind that one must pass through without getting attached.
There's a similar concept in Chinese traditions.
Yes, zu or rumo. That's a very strong term. It can be translated as fire possession or entering a demonic state. It describes a range of negative outcomes, from mild psychological distress to a full-blown psychosis-like state that can result from incorrect or overly aggressive practice.
And modern science is finally catching up to these ancient hoardings.
It is. A major 2020 review of studies found that about 8.3% of meditation practitioners experience some form of adverse effect.
8.3%. How does that number compare to other therapies?
It's roughly the same rate of adverse effects that we see in psychotherapy. So it's not an outlier, but it's also not zero. The symptoms reported can include increased anxiety, depersonalization, dissociation, and in rare cases, even psychosis.
Who is most at risk for these kinds of experiences?
The primary risk factors include things like sleep deprivation, especially on intensive retreats, and a prior history of anxiety or depression. The type of meditation also matters.
How so?
So-called deconstructive types of meditation, like some forms of vipassana, which are specifically designed to dismantle your sense of self, can be very destabilizing if they're done without proper guidance and psychological support. If you take a person who already has a fragile sense of self, and you give them a powerful technique to prove that they don't exist, that can be psychologically dangerous.
There's also a fascinating study by Poulin and colleagues from 2021 regarding what we're calling the selfishness paradox.
This is a deeply counterintuitive finding. The general assumption is that meditation makes people nicer, more compassionate. But this study found that mindfulness can actually decrease prosocial behavior. That is, it can make people more selfish, but only under a specific condition if they view themselves as being highly independent entities.
So if you go into the practice with a strong me against the world mindset, meditation might just make you care less about the world.
That's the essence of the finding. For people with what they call an independent self-control, mindfulness can help them meditate away their guilt or distress about not helping others. So if you use the technique to just reduce your own negative feelings, you might simply stop feeling the need to help. It could reinforce an existing self-centeredness.
Whereas for people who see themselves as interdependent,
For those who see themselves as fundamentally connected to others, the same practice appears to increase compassion and prosocial behavior.
so that's a significant insight. It suggests the tool itself is neutral, but the intent and the mindset of the user can radically dictate the outcome.
Exactly. It's not magic. It seems to amplify the existing orientation of the practitioner. It can make a connected person feel more connected, and a disconnected person feel more comfortable in their disconnection.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground. We've traced the lineage from the Upanishads and the Yoga Sutras through the Buddhist evolutions and the parallel traditions in Taoism and the Abrahamic faiths. We've looked at the mechanics, the cushions, the beads, even the sticks.
We saw the transmission to the West and the secularization that led to its widespread medical and corporate acceptance.
And finally, we looked at the often ignored adverse effects and the complex ways it can affect our social behavior.
It really is a trajectory from a tool for spiritual liberation to a tool for stress management. The complexity lies in the fact that, as we said at the start, meditation is not one thing. It's a huge family of practices. You have people using these techniques to find God, people using them to destroy the ego, and people using them to lower their blood pressure so they can work longer hours at a stressful job.
And that raises the final question for our listener to consider. We have seen the technique systematically separated from the tradition. When you strip the practice of its cultural, its ethical, and its religious context, the rich biography we've just discussed, does it remain the same thing? Or does it become something fundamentally different?
That really is the central question. Is the technique the medicine, or was the tradition the whole framework of the medicine all along?
Thanks for listening.